record a quick update of today. I just finished recording a podcast episode, and my voice already feels a bit hoarse, which shows perhaps how little I use my voice during the day, especially when I'm not seeing many people at the moment, and I'm not taking any phone calls, so perhaps recording that episode was probably the most talking I've done in the last week or so, maybe, or the last few days at least. I noticed that recently when I'm not wearing my glasses, my eyes feel more strained, and it really affects my mind as well in some ways. There seems to be a sensitivity noticed more recently when I'm watching something or reading or writing, that if I don't have my glasses, and it's almost hard to describe. I'm not sure if it's like a strain, and it's almost a tiredness as well. It seems like my mind, perhaps it's just a simple fact that with the straining of trying to read stuff or watch something that's where it's straining my eyes, then maybe it affects my mind in terms of processing. But for some reason I feel that it's related to mental health. I don't know why, because it feels like that it's not just as simple as just my eyes getting worse. It feels like there's some maybe relation to stress or to other things that I feel is happening with me. Some strange reason I had loads of thoughts about universal credit and about my assessment that still hasn't taken place yet, and there just seem to be sort of mental scenarios going through my head of trying to explain myself, and it just felt very painful and frustrating, and that I felt like I was going to be not believed, and that I wouldn't have an explanation to answer their questions or to explain my health. And it was quite stressful and quite a lot for me. I guess in some ways it was like it was happening because my body and my mind felt the thoughts, feelings and emotions of that as I was, and I felt like one of those things where I couldn't stop it from happening. I probably at a time wasn't fully aware that I was in the middle of that kind of, I wouldn't say daydream, but maybe in some ways it is. There's a name for it as well. I don't know if I'd say it's dissociation, but I don't have a full understanding of that in its most severe way. I do, where I think it's an out of body experience, but maybe there's sort of subtle and other like layers of dissociation. Maybe that was one of them, where I felt like I was viewing something but I wasn't in control, or there's some disconnection to it in some ways. So I think the longer this is being dragged out, maybe a lot of it is just I don't know what's happening with universal credit, if they're really backed up, but it seems to be weighing on me because of it's not going to be a nice experience. And at first it was nice just to have a gap and to not think about it, but the longer it goes on, it's like I don't like the thought at some point that I have to go through this difficult experience of the assessment. And it's now having the opposite effect, where it's I'd rather have it over and done with. I managed to go to a cafe today to do a bit of writing and to do some uploading as well. I've been trying to upload some of these vlogs onto some podcast platforms, just sort of going through with that. And all at once at the cafe I became quite anxious, and it started to rain, so a lot of the people outside, a lot of sort of mums with a lot of mothers with their pushchairs and things all came inside, and there was lots of movement, and it's quite a small cafe, so they're all kind of going past me and congregating, and there's a little room, there's kind of 2 rooms to the cafe, and I realised that the pathway to toilets were blocked. There was lots of sort of pushchairs and stuff, and immediately I felt anxious because I kind of needed to go, but I didn't want to go into that energy field of lots of people talking, and some babies were crying, and it was just a lot, and I didn't want to go into the middle of that and have to ask, can you move all these pushchairs out of the way, because I need to get through. But and it just made it easier. I'd been there for a little while, so it wasn't like I just got there and I just took the decision to leave. I just thought, I don't live too far, I can just go home, and I wasn't probably going to stay a huge amount longer, but I felt mixed about that decision. I thought to myself, do I not really don't have the energy or strength to just ask them, hey, I need to get through, can you move? Can you just make some room for me to get through? But on the other side, it's understandable where I'm that sensitive and that fragile in some ways, where it just didn't seem like it was possible for me to do that. It's also just worrying. I had a thought this morning of, is this what my life is now? Just in regards to my mental health and me spending days alone, which is a big part of that is my choice in some ways. In some ways it isn't, but I guess the social, if I can try and communicate this, the social outlets that I do have, I've minimised, or I've not taken part in. So the days, recently that I've shared here, where I've cancelled social plans or said, to people like, I can't join you. So that part feels like choice, but I guess it's okay to feel that even though I've made decisions for my own health, it's made me feel isolated, which is, I feel it's still fair to feel that, even though I've made those choices, in some ways, because there wasn't a choice for me to go or to, in terms of my health. So so I feel quite isolated in some ways, and in some ways it's what I'm used to. I'm used to kind of being on my own, in my own space for a long time now. But the difference is, this time I feel a lot more vulnerable in my health, and a lot more, just doing a little bit of writing today, just again, it drained me and tired me out. When in the past, when I've been alone, it's been more of the writing's been more of a companion, where I've been able to write for hours, read for hours, and so there's real fulfillment in those activities. Whereas now, it feels like it's hard to get fulfillment out of it because it's such a struggle to put my concentration into something where there isn't much concentration available, isn't much mental energy available. And so I was sat at the cafe just thinking, there's parts of me doesn't want to give up, parts of me wants to still be creative. It feels like I've got that energy to be creative, but I just don't have the outlet or the capacity to do so. And so I was sat there thinking, what do I do with my life? Which was quite a heavy question to ask. And I try not to dwell on it for too long because there isn't really a positive answer for that, and I don't know what the future holds, so it didn't feel like a helpful question to ask, I don't think. Sometimes it can be healthy to kind of zoom out of life and get a landscape of different things, whether it's zooming out to see what the next 6 months may hold, or the next year, or to analyse or consider the past, reflect on the last 6 months or the last year. But things are so unpredictable and so fragmented, and it doesn't seem to make any sense to try and ask those big questions, really. So in the cafe I thought about, perhaps, getting back and recording a vlog, recording a podcast, and it's difficult because even this is a struggle. Like it's like the writing. It's like things are not coming out the way I want them to, and I know that's just because of the state of my health, where my mind perhaps has a way of wanting to articulate, explain stuff, but whatever difficulties my mind is having, it's not producing a smooth flow of words or the accuracy of what I want to say. It's coming out quite in a sort of a bumbly way, and that's frustrating. It takes out the enjoyment and the fulfillment of doing this. But in some ways, this is all I have at the moment, in terms of trying to be productive and having an outlet and doing some sort of activity in a day, some focus, because I don't know what else I can do at the moment. I feel like without doing this or going to cafes or libraries to try and write, it just feels like it's just going to exacerbate everything, depression, anxiety, and a host of other symptoms that I'm feeling, the fogginess of my mind, and I think that's just going to make me do more destructive behaviours, whether it's such as going to bed late and sleeping a whole bunch and having that whole of out of whack, and we looked at I shared the effects of that the other day, and I can imagine that being complete, wiping me out each day, and then it'll be easy to kind of binge on food, and why, with the thoughts of having, why not binge on food, what have I got to lose now? So it feels like everything I'm doing now is like a very thin layer of almost tissue paper, and all of that destructiveness is just there. So everything feels quite fragile at the moment in what I'm doing. I'm just doing my best to keep my head above surface. I have not to sink into those behaviours where it's just a very slippery slope, and it's so easy just to have one thing affecting everything else, whether it's sleep or food, or so I'm feeling those tendencies now to almost just give up, and to even though I went to the cafe to write, and on one level it can seem like, oh, that's a good healthy thing, and if I just share that with somebody, they may say, you're doing well, it's good, it's not easy to do that. But on the flip side of that, at the cafe, which I'm just remembering now, that I had strong thoughts of going to A&E, because I was just feeling really unwell, really. That's the only word I can use for it, really. I don't know how to break it down more at the moment. It's a real struggle to do that. And I had the thought of, getting there, and similar thoughts where, what can I say to explain myself? Like I need someone to just see me and think, wow, not just rely on me to try and convince them or explain things. I need, a doctor to kind of see me and see what I'm struggling with, and it doesn't feel, and so it kind of, but then there's lots of thoughts around, what can they really do, besides almost kind of commit me there, and there was a question of, do I want that? And in some ways it feels like my health's reached that critical point where it's not a choice in some ways. The thought of being on some sort of ward or psychiatric sort of place, sometimes there's a thought of, oh, that's not that nice. I'd rather be here at home where I have more freedom, and I can, have the freedom to come and go, have the freedom to eat what I want. But that narrative is becoming narratives becoming narrower in some ways, where it doesn't feel like there's a choice really to feel those feelings, because my health's getting that critical, where it doesn't feel like there's a preference in some ways of, I'd rather stay here because it's less scary. It feels like in some ways it's getting easier to accept the consequences of going to A&E, where I may be limited, depending on whatever happens. But I feel really vulnerable to another doctor just not seeing me and looking at me and saying, there's nothing wrong, or it just feels so painful to go through that. I don't know how I'd react, really. It just feels scary, and also it feels scary because I don't know what I need. I don't know what I want or need. I just know that I'm at a close point of not being able to take care of myself and help myself, and manage myself, whether it's cooking, cleaning, taking showers, all of the above are increasingly becoming more difficult. And is it enough to go to A&E with not knowing the answers, with just knowing that you can't take care of yourself? Is that enough? Because every time I feel like I've asked for help, then they've kind of, almost like a gauntlet, they pose these questions in front of me, like, okay, what is it that you need, and what is it that we can do for you? And that I don't have the answers for that, and it feels like with not having the answers, you don't get the help. And so I'm wondering if things are different at A&E, where I go there and it's almost like I don't know how to ask for help, which sounds bizarre, because if you turn up physically injured, and immediately they'll be like, okay, yeah, we see that, but I don't know how to transmit or how to show the state of my mind or the state of my mental health to somebody. I've written a big long document to try and bridge that gap, and it doesn't seem like it translated with the GP surgery. And it almost makes me more unwell, and I almost don't want to go there and then come out with not being heard, not being seen, the injury of that, and feeling even more unwell in myself, which can be really scary. It feels scary now. And it just leaves me with a lack of confidence of, what should I do? Should I go to A&D? I don't really feel like I have someone I can confide in, really, because I feel like there's people I can say that to, and then they may. I did share with a friend, and they were supportive and encouraging to say, perhaps if you're feeling like you need to go, then just go. You don't have to be, it's good to go when you're well enough to decide to go, versus, where you're almost too unwell to get yourself there. But it still just seems very scary. Maybe right now there's enough, this makes things confusing, enough wellness in me, to not take myself there, to just hang in there, really. Because I think that's what a sense I get from the doctors, is that you're on your own pretty much, and you just have to, we're all we've got this natural ability in us to try and take care of ourselves, and I feel like the doctors, with my lack of help from the GP surgery, it kind of instills that you've just got to try and take care of yourself. So that's still, it feels like that's still there, but at some point the scales are going to balance when A&D is going to be a bit higher than trying to hang in there and take care of myself. And at some point it'll probably be a case of where it doesn't feel like a choice, which it kind of came close to happening today in some ways. Because I just sense my mind is getting worse. With the writing today at the cafe, it was just even more challenging to kind of analyze a sentence, and to look to see how to make it cleaner and to make it more readable. And the craft of writing, it just felt like it's like almost felt like a combine harvester, or a cog that's slowly becoming more and more rusty and more difficult for it to go around. It's still going around, but it's grinding against something else, and it's taking an effort to, whether it's for me to think a thought, to go outside, to do grocery shopping, what to get, activities and everything, whatever the mind is using. It's just like rusted cogs, and it's grinding to a halt almost. I'm still pushing it to try and go around when it's still just about going around, but it's close to reaching a standstill where it's too stuck. And I think if and when I do reach that point, then that will probably force me to go to A&D. And it feels strange, because even at this place, worse, I still feel like a fraud that I'm going to A&D, like, because there's still some part of me that feels well, or that what's the word, emanates health or wellness. Like if I was to go, it feels like my face doesn't and my voice doesn't show that how unwell I feel in my mind. And feels like I'm going in circles here, but I guess this is what this space is for, just to just to talk and offload. So I'm going to head outside now because I realise I've got no, on a lighter subject, I realise I've got nothing sweet in my place. I've got no chocolate or biscuits, and usually after a meal I usually like to have something sweet. I haven't got much of a sweet tooth, but just to change the taste, to have a few biscuits or a chocolate bar or something, and I thought it'd be a good excuse to go outside and get me to go outside to buy something. So and it's really funny because I've lived here for just over a year, and only now I've just learned about a potential shortcut to a little grocery shop, and maybe a potential back entrance to it that I didn't realise existed, and it's quite close to me. And the grocery shop is actually on a really busy road that I don't tend to walk down, but going through the back entrance is kind of a quiet side streets. So usually I go to another grocery store which is a bit more of a quieter walk that's a lot smaller than this one. So it's quite funny where I'm just going to try out this route and see if there is actually a back entrance to it, and see if that's possible. And I thought it would motivate me to upload this as well, and upload the podcast episode for tomorrow, which I'm still kind of got a new sort of recent intention of trying to make sure there's an episode released every Fridays, sort of a kind of a relaxed sort of goal. So I'm going to try and get myself outside. When it's raining, I find it's really hard to think of what to wear. Like, should I wear my waterproof trousers and my Mac, or is my rain Mac alone enough? So little things like that sometimes can take a lot of energy to think through and to decide. Maybe I'll take my waterproof trousers perhaps. Sometimes I feel self-conscious wearing them, like I feel they're not kind of they're not cool to wear, or I'd look a bit odd wearing them, like I'm ready to hike the mountains or something. But I feel it obviously keeps me dry, so that's good. So maybe I shouldn't be too worried about how it looks in some ways. So I'm going to try and do that. I think it's getting to late afternoon now, so maybe it'll be a bit quieter in there. I've been watching a bit of tennis at Wimbledon's on at the moment, so it's been I've been dipping into it because I feel like sometimes the intensity of the tennis and the scoreline, sometimes it can be a bit too much for me to absorb. That it'd be a bit draining to watch a lot all at once. So I haven't really watched a complete match yet. I watched the end of a match that just finished. It was nice to catch the ending of that, and I've been reading between games. So when they kind of have their sit-down rest break, I've been using that to read, and it reminded me of the old days when I felt like I was really focused on writing. And I remember having this, I think I was watching a French Open, and I had this book, a fiction book, and I'd so wanting to make use of every minute to read, which is a big part of writing. So in between games, and like years ago, I'd read this book and then come back to as soon as they start playing again. And I thought like every bit of reading would count, and I'm doing it now just as a bit of just trying to get in some reading, because I've been struggling to do that, and I feel like it will give me a break from watching the tennis. So when I do have their sit-down break for a couple of minutes, I can just do a bit of reading, or when there's a lull in play, I can do little bits of reading, and it seems to work out well. And, I can read a paragraph here and there, because I'm not managing much reading at the moment. So I'm going to continue with that, I think. I've been trying to watch a bit of the chess as well. As a chess tournament on at the moment, and the candidates, and I just hit the shots and then come back and check in on the chess and the tennis, see what's happening.